Good evening, and welcome back to Footnotes Folly. I am Professor Reginald St. John Pemberton, and we return to the great work of Flavius Josephus, the Antiquities of the Jews. Book 6 ended on Mount Gilboa, with Saul fallen and the throne empty. Tonight we open Book 7, the Reign of David, and we give it complete, in plain modern English, from Whiston's grand old public domain translation. The plain rendering and the asides are my own. This is Book 7 Part 1. David is made king but only over one tribe at first, at Hebron, while Saul's surviving son holds the rest. We follow the long, bitter war between the two houses, the deadly rivalry of the two great captains Joab and Abner, and the treacherous murders that finally leave David king over all Israel. Then his masterstroke, the capture of the ancient fortress of Jerusalem from the Jebusites, and its making into the city of David, to which he brings up the ark of God in triumph. Let us begin.
This battle happened on the same day that David returned to Ziklag after defeating the Amalekites. David had already been in Ziklag for 2 days when, on the third day after the battle, the man who had killed Saul came to him. He had escaped from the fight between the Israelites and the Philistines. His clothes were torn, and ashes were on his head. When he bowed before David, David asked where he had come from. He answered that he had come from the battle of the Israelites. He told David that the outcome had been disastrous. Many tens of thousands of Israelites had been killed, and Saul and his sons had also died. He said he could give David a reliable account, because he had been present when the Hebrews were defeated and had been with the king as he fled. He did not deny that he himself had killed the king when Saul was about to be captured by the enemy. He said Saul had urged him to do it, because after falling on his sword, his severe wounds had left him too weak to finish killing himself. The man also produced proof that the king was dead, the gold bracelets that had been on Saul's arms and the crown he had taken from Saul's body and brought to David. David no longer had any reason to doubt the man's report, since he saw clear signs that Saul was dead. He tore his garments and spent the whole day with his companions weeping and mourning. His grief was made greater by the thought of Jonathan, Saul's son, who had been his most faithful friend and had helped save his life. David showed both great virtue and great kindness toward Saul. Although Saul had often put David's life in danger, David not only took Saul's death deeply to heart, but also punished the man who had killed him. David told the man that he had accused himself by admitting that he had killed the king, and when David learned that he was the son of an Amalekite, he ordered him to be put to death. David also wrote laments and funeral praises for Saul and Jonathan, and those writings have survived down to my own time. After David had paid these honors to the king, he ended his mourning and asked God, through the prophet, which city of the tribe of Judah God would give him to live in. The answer was that God gave him Hebron. So David left Ziklag and came to Hebron, bringing with him his 2 wives and his armed men. Then all the people of that tribe came to him and made him their king. When David heard that the people of Jabesh Gilead had honorably buried Saul and his sons, he sent messengers to praise them. He accepted what they had done as a kindness, promised to repay them for their care for the dead, and at the same time told them that the tribe of Judah had chosen him as king. As soon as Abner, the son of Ner, learned that the king Jonathan and Saul's 2 other sons had fallen in the battle, he hurried to the camp. Abner had been general of Saul's army, and he was a very active and good-natured man. He took with him Saul's remaining son, whose name was Ishbosheth, crossed over into the land beyond Jordan, and made him king over the whole people except the tribe of Judah. He set up Ishbosheth's royal residence in a place called Mahanaim in our language, and the camps in the language of the Grecians. From there Abner quickly took a chosen body of soldiers to fight those of the tribe of Judah who were willing to oppose him, because he was angry that this tribe had made David their king. Joab, whose father was Suri and whose mother was Zeruiah, David's sister, was general of David's army and went out to meet Abner by David's order. Joab had with him his brothers Abishai and Asahel, along with all David's armed men. When he met Abner at a certain fountain in the city of Gibeon, he prepared for battle. Abner said he wanted to find out which side had the braver soldiers, and the 2 commanders agreed that 12 soldiers from each side should fight together. The men chosen by both generals came out between the 2 armies. They threw their lances against each other, drew their swords, seized one another by the head, held fast, and drove their swords into one another's sides and groins, until all of them died together as if by mutual agreement. After these men fell dead, the rest of the armies fought a fierce battle. Abner's men were beaten, and once they were defeated, Joab did not stop pursuing them. He pressed hard upon them and urged his soldiers to follow closely and not grow tired of killing them. His brothers also pursued them eagerly, especially the younger brother, Asahel, who was the most remarkable of them. Asahel was famous for his speed on foot. He was not merely faster than men, but was said to have outrun a horse when they raced together. This Asahel ran violently after Abner and would not turn at all from the straight path, either to the right or to the left. Abner looked back and tried skillfully to avoid his attack. At times he told Asahel to stop the chase and take the armor of one of Abner's soldiers. When he could not persuade him to do that, he urged him to restrain himself and stop pursuing him, warning that Asahel might force him to kill him, and then Abner would not be able to look Asahel's brother in the face. But Asahel accepted none of these warnings, and kept pursuing him. So Abner struck him with the spear he was carrying as he fled, using a backward blow, and gave him a fatal wound. Asahel died at once. When the men pursuing Abner with Asahel reached the place where Asahel lay, they stood around the body and stopped chasing the enemy. Joab himself and his brother Abishai ran past the dead body. Their anger over Asahel's death became a cause of still greater zeal against Abner, and they pursued him with incredible speed and eagerness as far as a place called Ammah. It was about sunset. Joab then went up a certain hill, standing there with the tribe of Benjamin, and from that height he saw both them and Abner. Abner cried out loudly, saying that it was not right for men of the same nation to provoke one another into such a bitter fight. As for Asahel, Joab's brother, Abner said Asahel himself had been at fault, because he would not listen when Abner advised him to stop pursuing him. That was what had led to his wound and death. Joab accepted what Abner said, and took his words as an explanation concerning Asahel. He called the soldiers back with the sound of the trumpet, using it as the signal to retreat, and so he ended the pursuit. Joab camped there that night, but Abner marched all night, crossed the river Jordan, and came to Saul's son Ishbosheth at Mahanaim. The next day Joab counted the dead, and arranged their funerals. About 360 of Abner's soldiers had been killed, while David's men had lost 19, besides Asahel. Joab and Abishai carried Asahel's body to Bethlehem and buried him in the tomb of their fathers. Then they came to David at Hebron. From that time an internal war began and lasted a long while. Through the dangers they endured, David's followers grew stronger, while the servants and subjects of Saul's sons grew weaker almost every day. About this time David had become the father of 6 sons, born from 6 different mothers. The eldest was born to Ahinoam, and he was called Araunah. The second was Daniel, born to David's wife Abigail. The third was named Absalom, born to Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. The fourth he named Adonijah, born to his wife Haggith. The fifth was Shephatiah, born to Abital. The sixth he called Ithream, born to Eglah. While this civil war continued, and the subjects of the 2 kings often came to action and battle, Abner, the general of the army of Saul's son, kept the people loyal to Ishbosheth through his prudence and the great influence he had among the multitude. They remained on Ishbosheth's side for a considerable time. But afterward Abner was blamed and accused of going into Saul's concubine, whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. When Ishbosheth complained against him, Abner was deeply troubled and angry, because he believed Ishbosheth had treated him unjustly, though Abner had shown him the greatest kindness. So Abner threatened to transfer the kingdom to David, and to show that Ishbosheth did not rule over the people beyond Jordan by his own ability or wisdom, but because of Abner's military leadership and faithful command of his army. Abner sent ambassadors to David at Hebron and asked David to give him security by oath that he would treat him as his companion and friend, on the condition that Abner would persuade the people to leave Saul's son and choose David as king over the whole country. David was pleased with Abner's message and made this agreement with him. But David asked Abner to give, as the first proof that he would carry out the agreement, the restoration of David's wife Michal. David said she belonged to him because he had purchased her through great dangers, and by bringing Saul her father 600 heads of the Philistines. So Abner took Michal from Phaltiel, who was then her husband, and sent her to David. Ishbosheth himself helped him do this, because David had written to him that by right his wife ought to be restored to him. Abner also gathered together the elders of the multitude, the commanders, and the captains of thousands, and spoke to them. He told them that he had formerly discouraged them from their own resolution when they had been ready to abandon Ishbosheth and join David. But now, he said, he gave them permission to do so if they wished, because they knew that God, through Samuel the prophet, had appointed David to be king over all the Hebrews and had foretold that David would punish the Philistines, overcome them, and bring them under his power. When the elders and rulers heard this, and understood that Abner had now come over to the same view of public affairs that they had held before, they changed their course and came into David. After these men agreed to Abner's proposal, Abner called together the tribe of Benjamin, because all of that tribe served as the guards of Ishbosheth's body, and he spoke to them for the same purpose. When he saw that they did not oppose what he said at all, but submitted themselves to his judgment, he took about 20 of his friends and came to David so that he himself might receive security from David by oath. For we may rightly consider those things more firmly settled when each of us does them ourselves, than when we do them through another. Abner also told David what he had said to the rulers, and to the whole tribe of Benjamin. David received him courteously and treated him with great hospitality for many days. When Abner was dismissed, he asked David to bring the multitude with him, so that Abner might hand over the government to him while David himself was present and watching what was done. After David sent Abner away, Joab, the general of David's army, came immediately to Hebron. He had learned that Abner had been with David, and had left shortly before under agreements and sworn arrangements that the government would be delivered to David. Joab feared that David would place Abner, who had helped him gain the kingdom, in the highest rank of honor, especially because Abner was a shrewd man in other matters, skilled in understanding affairs, and in managing them artfully as circumstances required. Joab feared that he himself would be lowered in rank and deprived of command over the army. So he took a deceitful and wicked course. First he tried to slander Abner to the king, urging David to beware of him, and not to trust what Abner had promised to do for him. Joab claimed that everything Abner did was aimed at confirming the government for Saul's son, that Abner had come to David deceitfully and with guile, and that he had gone away hoping to gain his purpose by this scheme. But Joab could not persuade David this way, and saw that David was not angered at all. So he turned to a bolder plan than the first. He determined to kill Abner. To do this, he sent messengers after Abner, instructing them that when they overtook him they should call him back in David's name and tell him that David had something to say to him about his affairs, something he had forgotten to mention while Abner was with him. The messengers overtook Abner at a certain place called Basira, which was 20 furlongs from Hebron. When Abner heard what they said, he suspected none of the harm that was about to fall on him and came back. Joab met him at the gate and received him in the kindest manner, as if he were Abner's most devoted acquaintance and friend. For people who undertake the vilest actions, in order to prevent any suspicion that they intend private harm, often make the greatest show of what truly good men do sincerely. Joab took Abner aside from his own followers as though he wanted to speak with him privately, and brought him into an empty place in the gate. He had no one with him except his brother Abishai. Then Joab drew his sword and struck Abner in the groin, and Abner died by Joab's treachery. Joab himself said this was punishment for his brother Asahel, whom Abner had struck and killed while Asahel was pursuing him in the battle of Hebron. But the truth was that Joab acted from fear of losing command of the army and his honor with the king, fearing that he would be deprived of those advantages, and that Abner would receive the highest rank in David's court. From these examples anyone may learn how many and how great acts of wickedness men will dare to do for the sake of gaining money and authority, and in order not to lose either of them. When they desire to obtain such things, they acquire them through countless evil practices. Then, when they are afraid of losing them, they secure them for themselves by practices much worse than the earlier ones. They act as though no calamity could be so terrible as failing to obtain such exalted authority, or once they have obtained it, and by long habit have tasted its sweetness, losing it again. Since that last loss would be the heaviest of all afflictions to them, they all contrive and venture upon the most difficult actions out of fear of losing it. But it is enough that I have made these brief reflections on that subject. When David heard that Abner had been killed, he was deeply grieved in soul. Stretching out his hands to God, he called all men to witness and cried out that he had no part in Abner's murder, and that Abner's death had not been caused by his command or approval. He also wished that the heaviest curses would fall on the man who killed him and on his whole house, and he devoted those who had helped in the murder to the same punishments because of it. David took care not to appear to have had any hand in this killing, which would have contradicted the assurances and oaths he had given to Abner. He commanded all the people to weep and lament for Abner, and to honor his dead body with the usual solemn ceremonies. That meant tearing their garments, putting on sackcloth, and wearing the clothing as they walked before the bier. David himself followed the bier, along with the elders and the rulers, lamenting Abner. By his tears he showed both the goodwill he had held toward Abner while he was alive and his sorrow for him now that he was dead, and also that Abner had not been removed with David's consent. I am greatly troubled at the death of so good a man. The affairs of the Hebrews have suffered great harm by being deprived of him, a man so able to preserve them by his excellent counsel and by the strength of his hands in war. God, who pays attention to all men's actions, will not allow this man Joab to go unavenged. But know this, I am not able to do anything to these sons of Zeruiah, Joab and Abishai, who have more power than I have. God will repay their insolent attempts upon their own heads. David buried Abner at Hebron in a magnificent manner and composed funeral elegies for him. He was the first to stand weeping over the monument, and he caused others to do the same. Indeed, Abner's death disturbed him so deeply that his companions could not force him to take any food. David swore that he would taste nothing until the sun had set. This conduct won him the goodwill of the multitude. Those who had loved Abner were greatly satisfied with the respect David paid him after death, and with the faith David had pledged to him, which was shown by granting him all the usual ceremonies as though he had been David's kinsman and friend. David did not allow Abner to be neglected or injured by a dishonorable burial, as if he had been an enemy. As a result, the whole nation rejoiced at the king's gentleness and mildness of character. Everyone was ready to suppose that the king would take the same care of them in similar circumstances, since they saw what care he showed in the burial of Abner's body. David especially intended to gain a good reputation, and therefore he took care to do what was proper in this case, so that no one had any suspicion that he had caused Abner's death. This was the fatal end of Abner's life. When Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, heard that Abner was dead, he was deeply distressed. He had lost a kinsman who had in fact given him the kingdom, and Abner's death troubled him greatly. Ishbosheth did not live much longer. He was betrayed and attacked by the sons of Rimmon, whose names were Baanah and Rechab, and they killed him. These men belonged to a family of the Benjamites, and were among the leading men of that tribe. They thought that if they murdered Ishbosheth, David would give them large rewards, appoint them as commanders, or at least trust them with some important office. One day they found Ishbosheth alone, asleep at noon in an upper room. None of his guards were present. The woman who kept the door was not watching either, for she too had fallen asleep, partly because of the work she had been doing and partly because of the heat of the day. Baanah and Rechab entered the room where Ishbosheth, Saul's son, lay sleeping, and they killed him. Then they cut off his head, and traveled all that night and the next day. They acted as though they were fleeing from the people they had wronged and going to a man who would accept their deed as a favor and give them safety. So they came to Hebron, showed David the head of Ishbosheth, and presented themselves as his friends, men who had killed his enemy and rival. "You vile men, you shall immediately receive the punishment you deserve. Did you not know what vengeance I took on the man who murdered Saul and brought me his golden crown, even though the man who killed him claimed that he had done it as a kindness, so Saul would not be captured by his enemies? Or do you think my character has changed? Do you suppose I am no longer the same man I was then, but now take pleasure in wicked men and regard your evil actions as a favor, when you have become murderers of your master? You killed a righteous man on his bed, a man who had never harmed anyone and who had treated you with great kindness and respect. Therefore you shall suffer the punishment due for his sake, and the vengeance I must bring on you for killing Ishbosheth, and for imagining that I would gladly receive his death from your hands. You could not have put a greater stain on my honor than by thinking such a thing of me." After David said this, he had them punished with every kind of torment, and then put them to death. He gave Ishbosheth's head the customary burial rites, and laid it in the grave of Abner. When these matters had ended, all the chief men of the Hebrew people came to David at Hebron, together with the commanders over thousands and the other rulers, and surrendered themselves to him. They reminded him of the goodwill they had shown him during Saul's lifetime, and of the respect they had continued to pay him when he was captain over 1,000. They also reminded him that he and his sons had been chosen by God through Samuel, the prophet. They further declared that God had given him power to save the land of the Hebrews and to defeat the Philistines. David kindly accepted their eager support and urged them to continue in it, saying that they would have no reason to regret being so disposed toward him. After he had feasted them and treated them graciously, he sent them out to bring all the people to him. Then about 6,800 armed men came to him from the tribe of Judah, carrying shields and spears as their weapons. These men had continued with Saul's son until then, while the rest of the tribe of Judah had appointed David as their king. From the tribe of Simeon came 7,100 men. From the tribe of Levi came 4,700, with Jehoiada as their leader. After them came Zadok the high priest, along with 22 captains from his kindred. From the tribe of Benjamin there were 4,000 armed men, though the rest of that tribe still held back, expecting that someone from the house of Saul would reign over them. From the tribe of Ephraim came 20,800 men, mighty warriors, distinguished for their strength. From the half-tribe of Manasseh came 18,000 of the most powerful men. From the tribe of Issachar came 200 men who understood what was to happen afterward, and 20,000 armed men. From the tribe of Zebulun came 50,000 chosen men. This was the only tribe that came over to David as a whole, and all of them had the same weapons as the tribe of Gad. From the tribe of Naphtali came 1,000 notable men and rulers, whose weapons were shields and spears, and the tribe itself followed after them in such numbers as to be almost countless, 37,000 in all. From the tribe of Dan there were 27,600 chosen men. From the tribe of Asher came 40,000. From the 2 tribes beyond Jordan, together with the rest of the tribe of Manasseh, came 120,000 men who used shields, spears, helmets, and swords. The remaining tribes also used swords. This great multitude gathered to David at Hebron with a large supply of grain, wine, and every other kind of food, and with one consent they established David in his kingdom. After the people had rejoiced for 3 days in Hebron, David and all the people moved on and came to Jerusalem. The Jebusites, who lived in Jerusalem and were Canaanites by descent, shut their gates against David. To mock the king, they placed the blind, the lame, and all their main people on the wall, saying that even the lame would be enough to keep him from entering the city. They did this because they despised his power and trusted in the strength of their walls. David was enraged by this and began the siege of Jerusalem. He carried it on with the greatest energy and determination, intending that by taking this place he would prove his power and frighten all others who might have the same hostile attitude toward him. David took the lower city by force, but the citadel still held out. The king knew that the offer of honors and rewards would encourage the soldiers to do greater deeds, so he promised that whoever first crossed the ditches below the citadel, climbed up to the citadel itself, and captured it would be given command over the whole people. All the soldiers were eager to climb up, and none of them thought any hardship too great, because each desired the chief command. But Joab, the son of Zeruiah, got ahead of the rest. As soon as he had climbed up to the citadel, he called out to the king and claimed the chief command. After David drove the Jebusites out of the citadel, he rebuilt Jerusalem and named it the City of David. He lived there for the whole time of his reign. Before this, he had reigned over the tribe of Judah alone in Hebron for 7 years and 6 months. Once he chose Jerusalem as his royal city, his affairs prospered more and more through the providence of God, who took care that they should improve and increase. Hiram, the king of the Tyrians, also sent ambassadors to David and made a league of mutual friendship and assistance with him. Hiram sent him gifts as well, cedar trees, workmen, and men skilled in building and architecture, so that they could build him a royal palace at Jerusalem. David then built structures all around the lower city. He also joined the citadel to it, and made the whole place one united city. After he had surrounded everything with walls, he appointed Joab to take charge of them. David therefore was the first to drive the Jebusites out of Jerusalem and to call it by his own name, the City of David. In the time of our forefather Abraham it had been called Salem or Salima. Some say that Homer later mentioned it by the name Salima, for he called the temple Salima according to the Hebrew language, a word that signifies security. From the time of the war led by our general Joshua against the Canaanites, when he overcame them and divided the land among the Hebrews, until this time when David took Jerusalem by siege, the Israelites had never been able to drive the Canaanites out of Jerusalem. The whole interval was 515 years. I shall now mention Araunah. He was a wealthy man among the Jebusites, but David did not kill him during the siege of Jerusalem, because Araunah had goodwill toward the Hebrews and showed special kindness and affection toward the king himself. I will speak about this more fully at a more suitable time a little later. David married other wives in addition to those he already had, and he also had concubines. The sons born to him were 11 in number. Their names were Amnon, Enos, Eben, Nathan, Solomon, Jebin, Elian, Phalna, Anaphan, Jenny, and Eliphael. He also had a daughter named Tamar. 9 of these children were born from lawful wives, while the 2 last, named sons, were born from concubines. Tamar had the same mother as Absalom. When the Philistines learned that David had been made king of the Hebrews, they made war against him at Jerusalem. They seized the valley called the Valley of the Giants, a place not far from the city, and set up their camp there. But the king of the Jews never allowed himself to do anything without prophecy, without the command of God, and without relying on God as his security for what was to come. So he ordered the high priest to tell him what God's will was, and what the outcome of the battle would be. When the high priest foretold that David would gain both victory and dominion, David led his army out against the Philistines. When the battle began, he himself came around behind them, suddenly attacked the enemy, killed some of them, and put the rest to flight. No one should suppose that only a small army of Philistines came against the Hebrews, merely because they were defeated so suddenly and did nothing great or worth recording, or because their march was slow and they lacked courage. Rather, it should be understood that all Syria and Phoenicia, along with many other nations, including warlike nations, came to help them and took part in this war. This was the only reason why, although the Philistines had been conquered so often and had lost so many tens of thousands of men, they still came against the Hebrews with larger armies. Indeed, after they had so often failed in these battles, they came against David with an army 3 times as large as before, encamped in the same place as previously. The king of Israel therefore inquired of God again about the outcome of the battle. The high priest prophesied to him that he should keep his army in the groves called the Groves of Weeping, which were not far from the enemy's camp, and that he should not move or begin fighting until the trees of the grove began to move without any wind blowing. But as soon as those trees moved, and the time God had foretold came, he was to go out without delay to take a victory that was already prepared and plainly certain. The ranks of the enemy's army could not stand against him, but retreated at the first attack. David followed them closely, killing them as he went, and pursued them as far as the city Gaza, which is the boundary of their country. After this he plundered their camp, where he found great riches, and he destroyed their gods. After the battle had ended in this way, David thought it proper, after consulting with the elders, the rulers, and the commanders of thousands, to send for the men in the prime of life from among all his countrymen and from the whole land, and also for the priests and the Levites. His purpose was for them to go to Kirjath-jearim, bring the ark of God up from that city, carry it to Jerusalem, keep it there, and offer before it the sacrifices and other honors with which God was accustomed to be pleased. If they had done this during Saul's reign, they would not have suffered any great misfortunes at all. So when the whole body of the people had gathered, as they had resolved to do, the king came to the ark. The priest brought it out of the house of Amminadab and placed it on a new cart, and David allowed their brethren and their children to draw it along with the oxen. The king went before the ark, and the whole multitude of the people went with him. They sang hymns to God and used every kind of song customary among them, with many sounds from musical instruments, with dancing and the singing of psalms, and also with trumpets and cymbals. In this way they brought the ark toward Jerusalem. But when they came to the threshing floor of Chidon, as the place was called, Uzzah was killed by the anger of God. The oxen shook the ark, and Uzzah stretched out his hand because he felt he had to take hold of it. But because he was not a priest and yet touched the ark, God struck him dead. At this, both the king and the people were distressed by Uzzah's death, and the place where he died is still called the breach of Uzzah to this day. David was afraid. He supposed that if he received the ark into the city with himself, he might suffer in the same way as Uzzah, who had died simply because he had stretched out his hand toward the ark. Therefore David did not bring it into the city for himself, but turned it aside to a certain place belonging to a righteous man named Obededom, who was a Levite by family, and he deposited the ark with him. It remained there for 3 full months. During that time it increased the house of Obededom and brought many blessings upon it. When the king heard what had happened to Obededom, how he had gone from being a poor man of low condition to being exceedingly happy and envied by all who saw or heard about his house, David took courage. Hoping that no misfortune would come to him from it, he transferred the ark to his own house. The priests carried it, while 7 companies of singers, arranged in that order by the king, went before it. David himself played the harp and joined in the music, so that when his wife Michal, the daughter of Saul, who was our first king, saw him doing this, she laughed at him. When they had brought in the ark, they placed it under the tabernacle that David had set up for it. He offered costly sacrifices and peace offerings, treated the whole multitude to a feast, and distributed to the women, the men, and the infants a loaf of bread, a cake, another cake baked in a pan, and a portion of the sacrifice. After he had feasted the people in this way, he sent them away and returned to his own house. But when Michal his wife, the daughter of Saul, came and stood beside him, she wished him every other happiness and prayed that whatever else he might desire, as far as possible, would be given him by God, and that God would be favorable to him. Yet she blamed him because so great a king as he was had danced in an improper manner, and while dancing had uncovered himself among the male and female servants. David answered that he was not ashamed to do what was pleasing to God, who had preferred him before her father and before all others. He said that he would often play and dance, without regard to what the handmaidens or Michal herself thought of it. This Michal, David's wife, had no children. However, when she was afterward married to the man to whom Saul her father had given her, for at this time David had taken her away from him, and had her himself, she bore 5 children. But I shall discuss those matters in their proper place. Now when the king saw that his affairs were improving almost every day by the will of God, he thought he would offend him if he himself continued living in cedar houses, built very high and with the finest works of architecture in them, while he neglected the ark as it lay in a tabernacle. He therefore wanted to build a temple to God, just as Moses had foretold that such a temple would be built. When he spoke about these things with Nathan the prophet, Nathan encouraged him to do whatever he had in mind, since God was with him and was his helper in all things. David was then even more ready to begin that building. But God appeared to Nathan that very night, and commanded him to tell David that he kindly accepted David's purpose and desires, since no one before had taken it into his mind to build him a temple. Yet although David had conceived such a plan, God would not allow him to build the temple, because he had made many wars and was defiled by the slaughter of his enemies. However, after David's death, when he had reached old age and lived a long life, a temple would be built by one of his sons, who would receive the kingdom after him, and would be called Solomon. God promised to provide for Solomon, as a father provides for his son, preserving the kingdom for his son's descendants and handing it over to them. But if Solomon sinned, God would still punish him with diseases and barrenness of the land. When David learned this from the prophet, he was overjoyed to know that dominion would surely continue to his posterity, and that his house would be splendid and very famous. He came to the ark, fell down on his face, and began to adore God and thank him for all his benefits, for those already given, by raising him from a low state and from the work of a shepherd to such great dignity, dominion, and glory, for those promised to his posterity, and also for the providence God had shown toward the Hebrews in obtaining for them the liberty they enjoyed. After saying this and singing a hymn of praise to God, he went away.
And there we will pause, with David king over a united nation, enthroned in his new capital, the ark of God brought home at last. It is the bright morning of the reign. The hard man has become a great king, and everything he touches prospers. Next time, in part 2, the wars that built his empire against the Philistines, the Moabites, the Syrians and the Ammonites, and then, at the very height of his power, the evening on the rooftop, the sight of Bathsheba, and the one dark deed that will haunt his house for the rest of this book. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.